Hi there guys, got a video here for you today on the FX Panthera, and in this one we're going to be doing a final overview on the rifle. We're going to be talking through some of the modifications I've made to the rifle, as well as giving my final thoughts on it. So I bought the rifle in early August and I've had a good amount of time with it now, and the full journey that this rifle has taken is available on YouTube. With that said, let's get right into it, and the first thing that I want to discuss is the out-of-the-box performance of the rifle. Now, like most FXs, the build quality is very impressive. Everything is finished off nicely and the overall fit and finish is excellent, and this coupled with the cutout foam case means the rifle is presented very nicely. Next up, putting the rifle over the chronograph, I was really quite impressed. The rifle was running a little low, however the consistency of the rifle was quite impressive, with a spread of less than 10 over a magazine. Along with this, the shooting experience was beautiful. The cocking was lovely and smooth, and the adjustable butt pad and cheek piece made the rifle super easy to shoot. Normally I struggle with the length of pull on these rifles, so having an adjustable butt pad straight from the factory was great. The only minor niggle I had with the rifle straight out of the box was with the trigger itself. The trigger was a little heavy for my taste, and the actual second stage did have a little bit of creep to it. Now this wasn't a deal breaker, it was usable straight out of the box, but just not perfect. With all of this in mind, my initial impressions of the rifle were very good. I was looking forward to getting it down Pete's airgun farm and putting some pellets through it. Unfortunately, that's where the problems started. The out-of-the-box accuracy was awful, no consistent point of impact, and no matter what pellet I put through the rifle it would not group. The problem turned out to be the carbon fibre stiffener fitted from the factory. This was cut 5mm too long and meant that the jam nut was tightening up onto the carbon fibre stiffener rather than the liner. This was allowing the liner to flow up and down inside the barrel tube, meaning that it was not fixed. The other problem that I had was that during the third range session, the rifle started falling apart. The hammer spring adjuster jammed in the side of the rifle and after a little bit of wiggling fell out the side. This was caused by the grub screw in the back of the rifle working its way loose, and upon further inspection most of the screws in the main block of the rifle were only finger tight, so not a fantastic start. After shortening the carbon fibre stiffener, which is this piece here, and tightening up all the bolts in the block, the rifle did start to behave. It was consistent and semi-accurate, still not what I would expect from a 1900-pound rifle, but much better than it was. At this point the groups averaged around 25mm edge to edge at 50 yards and around 18mm edge to edge at 30 yards. Now at this point I do want to say that this was my personal experience with this particular rifle. I got very unlucky with this rifle, however the good people over at the Crawley Surplus store, which is the shop that I bought the rifle from, did offer me a full 100% refund. So if I had wanted to, I could have given the rifle back to them and got my money back. Although if I'm being honest with you, I really did like the way the rifle shot, and I knew with a little bit of work I could get the rifle turned around, so I chose to keep it. But still a big shout out to the people over at the Crawley Surplus store for being straight with me. And as I said, it wasn't all bad. The rifle does feel very nice in the shoulder, and the shooting experience was fantastic. Even at this stage it was clear that there was a great rifle under a few problems. The out-of-the-box regulator worked absolutely perfectly, and even when fitting a digital gauge to the side of the rifle, the regulator showed no signs of any creep. So the new body design as well as the brass piston seems to be working absolutely beautifully. With all that said, the goal for the rifle was clear. What we needed to do is turn the rifle around and make it shoot as good as possible. To do that, I concentrated on 4 areas of the rifle. First, the barrel, then the chassis of the rifle, followed by the magazines, and finally the trigger. Now all 4 of these areas have dedicated videos surrounding them, but I'll very briefly summarise them here. First up, I replaced the original STX liner with a solid barrel from an Air Arms HFT 500. This was a fairly simple job, it only really took a few hours on the lathe, and the new barrel transformed the rifle. No more random groups, just very consistent groupings averaging around 15mm edge to edge at 50 yards, and around 10mm edge to edge at 30, so a total night and day improvement. Next, after the barrel was replaced, I started to notice that how you held the rifle had an influence on the point of impact. If you shot the rifle with minimal physical interference, it was more accurate. I traced this back to the front rail, and if this was even slightly twisted, it would throw the pellet off. To combat this, I machined up a steel plate to reinforce the front rail, removing any possible twist and greatly reducing the effect of physical interference with a rifle. Another unintentional effect of this plate was that it deadened the rifle. Third was the magazine. Now, to be fair to the rifle, this was not bad to begin with, but a few spots in the magazine threw flyers. Taking a closer look at the mag, I noticed two things. First, the spring tension was a little too high, and second, a couple of the mag spots had burrs in the pellet chambers. To sort this out, I took the mag apart and cleaned up all the edges with a file and a blade, just to remove the sharp edges. After this was done, I removed some of the spring tension from the magazine so that the pellets were not getting squished before entering the barrel. Doing this made the magazines a little more reliable and removed most of the flyers that we were getting. The rifle was still slightly more accurate when single shot loading, however this is to be expected. The last thing I wanted to change on the rifle was the trigger. The factory trigger was fairly good out the box, although it was a little heavy and the second stage did have a bit of creep to it. The other thing I noticed is if you pulled the trigger back slowly, the trigger would lock back and need manually resetting. This turned out to be a bigger job than I first expected. What I ended up doing was replacing the original standard sear with a Mark I crown sear. Along with this, I remade the trigger wheel with the latching surface in a slightly different position. I also replaced the original trigger weight spring with a slightly lighter one and made a new second stage adjuster screw. The trigger now feels great. The blade resets each and every time, and the second stage weight is now adjustable, so I'm really happy with the way the trigger came out. Now this was obviously a fair amount of work, so for a super simple solution, I'd probably just recommend removing the second stage adjuster. This does turn the trigger into a single stage trigger, however once you get used to it, it does feel quite nice, and if you replace the original trigger weight spring, you can get the trigger feeling nice and light. With that all said, I'll take you downrange and I'll show you what this rifle can do. And here we are all set up in the 50-yard range at Pete's Airgun Farm. Unfortunately, no shooting footage today as the range was packed pretty much all day and I didn't want to risk the camera getting shot. I'm probably going to be investing in one of those trigger cams so I don't have to risk the camera every time I want to get some range footage. Anyway, a quick look through the scope and you can see what we're doing. We've got a number of targets set out at 50 yards on the back wall, and after a nice short walk you can see the groups up close. And all of these groups here were done using the magazine, shooting JSB shorts and shooting 5-shot groups. So I'll get you a quick look over the groups here, and the average over these two sheets was about 13.25mm edge to edge, which isn't bad for a sub 12 pound rifle. If you take a look over the groups as well, you can see how consistent it is. There's no real major variation between the group sizes, and they're all fairly uniform, so I'm super happy with how the rifle's performing at 50 yards. Bringing the target a little closer to 30 yards, you can see how well this rifle groups. At 30 yards, the rifle pretty much puts the pellets through the same hole, and even if we include the zeroing groups, you can see how well the rifle performs. Right then, with that all said, I hope you can see how well this little rifle turned out. We did have to give it a little bit of TLC to get it to this point, but I am really pleased with how it came out. Overall, I really am quite impressed with the Panthera block. I think it's a fantastic piece of kit, and I can see no real major issues with the block or the construction of the rifle in general. The regulator seems to be working absolutely perfectly straight out the box, as does the valve and the rest of the rifle, and I really can't see any major issues with the construction or the execution of the block itself. The only thing for me personally that lets it down is the STX liner. I'm not a big fan of the STX liner system in general, and I would much prefer a solid barrel fitted from the factory. And for me personally, that's the only thing holding this rifle back. I think if these rifles were fitted with a CZ barrel from the factory, they'd be near unbeatable. That is just my personal opinion though, There are plenty of people out there who really like the STX liner system, but for me personally it's my only major complaint with a rifle. With that said, the question that we normally ask at the end of these things is, would I buy another one? And the answer to that question is yes, I'd definitely have another one. If I was buying another one, I'd probably buy the compact hunter version rather than the long one again. The long one is quite nice, although the actual size of the rifle makes it a little unwieldy, and the size of the case is absolutely gigantic and it's a little bit of a pain to get stored. But I'd have no problem buying either the King or the Panthera again. The King is just the Panthera in a GRS stock. There are some other slight changes like the bottle being mounted to the front, but the main block of the rifle is the same between the two models. If I'm honest, I would like to do a short King build, so the King stock along with a nice short barrel and bottle combo. I think that would really look quite nice. But for now guys, that's pretty much going to do it for this particular video. So thanks for watching, I hope it's been useful, and we'll see you in the next one.